Hello and welcome to my new video. Today I will make a review of the exposure meter, and it's exposure meter of KEKS KM02. It's a new version of the KEKS exposure, or KEKS, I don't know how to pronounce it. So I bought it with my own money, so it's fully independent review, and I was on the market to put the exposure meter on my Leica because I broke off my previous one and I get this one. And it's several points which brings my attention to this particular unit. The first thing, I want exposure meter which is charging with a USB-C and not the battery. I want to have a screen. I want long working hours from the exposure meter to not think about it. And at the same time, I really like some features. For example, here I have a buttons, and on the previous one I actually have a wheels. I don't really like the idea of the wheels on exposure meter, and here I have a top buttons which helps to basically switch the functions. So it's really great and I really like this idea. The second thing, I like the screen on the back, and initially I thought it's much better than the screen on top. Now I'm actually not sure about that. Probably screen on top is much better than the screen how I have it here, but let's see what I can do with that. I'm thinking maybe it's a good idea, maybe it's not. But in the same time, this exposure meter have significant functions which I can say I like, and some of the functions and some of the things which I don't really like. And let's start with the unboxing of the thing, and later I will discuss actually my experience, because it's several rows which I passed already with this exposure meter on my Leica camera, and I just wanna share the experience, how it works, if it's precise or not. And as you probably know, I have my standard exposure meter from Sekonic for many years, and quite honestly, if you want to hear my advice, just have one of these in your collection, and this exposure meter will save your life for a long period of times without any problems. And I think this type of exposure meters just works forever. It's precise, it's extremely good, it's extremely kind of a long-lasting brand. It has a single AA battery, it works forever, all the time. Only one downside, it's additional tool, and when I make photo sets or something, it's just like, you know, hanging additionally on my shoulder or in my pocket, and I just want a little bit more simplicity in my workflow. So this is why I'm using this type of exposure meters on top of my camera, and at the same time I'm too poor to buy the Leica with the exposure meter inside. So let's start with unboxing. Exposure meter goes with the box. It's quite small and really nice packed. So let's open it up and see what's inside the box. It has quite professional packaging. You have a manual, you have some strange sticker with a logo there. Not sure why it's there. It's just probably the rest of the packaging. And quite nice instructional manual, and I actually need to read it to understand how the exposure meter works. And inside this foam you can find adapters for the hot shoe, cold shoe. It's a 3 different size, and one is already mounted on top of the exposure meter. You have exposure meter itself with one small plastic wrapping, and it feels quite nice. It's not so heavy, and I really like the finish on top. And in the same time, I can say this one looks more or less identical with my previous exposure meter. You have USB cable, and instructions actually claim that it's a fast charge. So let's open the brackets for the cold shoe and see what we have inside. You have additional pair of small bolts and 2 different types of the cold shoes, and you can basically select which one will suit your camera and which one will fit. And for some reason I can hear some rattling sound inside the exposure meter, which is strange. I try to click the buttons and I can still hear some kind of a strange noise inside the case. And on my channel, it usually means that we will disassemble that and see what's wrong inside, because I definitely don't want to go back and forward with the shipment and warranty. I will just fix it myself. On the bottom side, you have two small screws which unlock access to the full board. And on my previous exposure meter, it was actually flex board connecting the screen to the main board. And here you can see that it's physical board soldered together with a 90 degrees, and you have battery just on top of the assembly. And I already can see the problem. This small bolt is just not really mounted to anywhere. It's not screwed down, and it's just laying down there freely and rattling around the electrical components, which is not really nice and not really great, because it can cause short circuit and actually can ruin the whole board. So I'll just pop them off and see from where these two screws goes. You can see the two connections on the bottom side of the PCB there, and actually two holes on the top side. And apparently somebody forgets to put them in charge there. So basically the board holds on only two screws, and I will fix it now to screw them back with my screwdriver. It's easy fix, but unfortunately I'm not really happy with the quality, because I know that most of you will not go inside the thing and do not just learn how it works, and definitely will not screw things together back. This is not how the product should be made, and I'm not really happy with the quality, how the thing is done here. And as you can see, the battery is 280 mAh, so it's quite small, but I think for this type of application it's quite nice, and anyway you cannot really fit anything more in terms of size in this kind of a shell. So let's put everything together and close the top lid and try to turn on the exposure meter, because it goes with the discharge battery. I need to charge it first to see at least the screen and if anything works, or it's completely broken from the beginning. So now everything clicks fine, I have no problems whatsoever, and I will just try to charge it. And you can see when I plug the charger, I can see indicator of the power and everything goes black. So while it's charging, it doesn't really have screen always on with a charging percentage. So it's only show the charging percentage when it just starts, or if you turn it on and just press the working button, you can see on the right side is a small 1 dot indicator, means it's 10% of the charge. But overall exposure meter works. I will leave it for charging. It should not take a lot of time because of the capacity of the battery inside. So let's try to charge it fully and try to make some tests. So far I can see and read in the manual that it has a lot of different functions. You can go with a continuous metering mode, you can go with the exposure, you can go with the aperture or shutter speed priority, so you can measure different stuff, and it's also showing the luxes and EV values. And you can turn it off and make more simple view, which I will actually do for my purpose. Nevertheless, it was a mistake in the manufacturing, but we fixed it, and now I can easily use it and try to fit it on my Leica camera. So as you remember, it was 3 different hot shoes, cold shoes adapters, and from the beginning it mounted in the middle, so I cannot really rotate the shutter speed on my camera, so I need to mount it fully to the right to basically unlock the feature of the shutter speed change. It's quite easy operation, you just need to unscrew 3 different screws and just try to fit the hot shoe or cold shoe plate which you have with the kit inside your camera shoe and see which one it fits the best. In my experience, you have 3 of them and one is too loose. The mounted on a exposure meter is perfect, and you have one more for the wider or bigger hot shoe or cold shoe for your camera. So this is how it goes, and I will just try to fit all of them and see which one works, and some of them, as I said, even doesn't really fit to the camera. As I said before, they more or less same size, only the thickness is different, but in my case on Leica M42 is actually too long. I don't really like the plate which is sticking out too long from the cold shoe, and it means my exposure meter will basically hopping off from the camera, and on a Leica M42 you have a lever for the film advance, which is actually will be in the way of the cold shoe, so you kind of need to dig it up and it will not really work how it should work. So based on the observations with these plates, I cannot really say that it's perfect, and for my Leica M42 it's like 3 out of 10 in terms of adjustability and the precision of made for this camera. But if you can see, actually on their website it's supposed to be for Leica M42, and they even have specific meter which resembles old Leica meter from the back in the day. What I don't like additionally, that between the exposure meter and the body of the camera I have a quite big gap, and I think it's for all of the cameras and all of the exposure meters you will have that. So when you press it, it bends a little bit and it kind of bends the cold shoe of the camera, and in the same time you can see it here, it doesn't really fit perfectly, so it wobbles a little bit when you press the buttons, and it's some disadvantages with the fit on the camera. So let's charge it fully, and after that let's discuss what we can do with the settings and what we can do with the different types of parameters on the camera. So you can switch it in the continuous mode or with the mode of the metering with a single burst, so single click and you can get the metering, or in the same time you can switch it and completely change the parameters and make the f-stop or t-stop metering. But to understand how it works, you just need to read the manual, because it was not so straightforward and not so easy for me to understand, okay, how I can actually switch that. So I tried several buttons to press in the same time, I tried clicking the buttons, and it was not crazy obvious how to do that. So what it means, after half a year you need to change something, and you will definitely forget how to do that without the manual, and you will just spend some time with the clicking back and forward, try to find out what is actually the proper parameters to do that. So let's discuss now how it will behave and what I actually did after a prolonged period of time of use of this exposure meter on a camera in a real life world. After some use, I actually realized that I have several problems with this exposure meter. Nevertheless, it has 3 different hot shoes, cold shoes kind of mounts with a Leica notch. It doesn't really fit well on my camera. So because it doesn't have any springs, and usually, you know, the good cameras and good camera flashes, they have springs on the cold shoe, so you can slide it and it's actually fixed there. And this is one of the main disadvantages of this cold shoe, which I don't really like, and I really like it on the previous exposure meter what I have, and here it's a little bit kind of offsetted and it doesn't really fit my camera. So as you can see, I just modified with a PI tape. It's not perfect solution. Maybe I will do something with it. Maybe I will 3D print it and just make my own. Not sure about that yet. But what I really like about this exposure meter, that it's actually have written 5 volts charging here, but it charged with a normal charger with a high power. So it basically means that it has IC there, which is switching the power. It can communicate with a power adapter, and it can tell that it requires 5 volts. And this is really great feature. So it means you don't need a special cable. You don't need like special 5-volt cable. It will work with the rest of the things, and it's really great. Buttons are clicky, as you can hear. They work really well. I really like them. What I don't like that if I press on a backside, I can basically make single metering, but it doesn't really go immediately with the metering, with a constant metering. So I need to press twice, and only after that I will get the constant reading metering. I'm not sure if I can change it in settings, probably not. But what I like, what I can change in settings, that I can change the aperture stops there. Because what I really like to shoot as a Leica user, I like to shoot with a static, basically, exposure. So I really like to shoot with a static shutter speed and changing aperture instead. So this is probably for people who is not familiar with the Leica system, it's not really obvious, but Leica people actually shoot with a standard setup shutter speed all the time. So what I'm using, for example, ISO 200 film. I set up my shutter speed on 250 and just change aperture. So this is how 99% of the Leica people shoot, and this is basically how kind of the system itself have mentality behind. So I really like that I can change to full stop exposure, and in the same time what I can do, I can change the downtime of the exposure meter. So it will turn off in a specific time, and at the same time I can turn off this feature, so it can basically work forever, and I can just use it with a single button to make a measure and just stop it on there. So this is really great. I really like how this type of feature works there, and it has a menu. I really like these things, and you can change aperture stops, you can change shutter speed stops and ISO stops. This is really great, and you can also change the metering results. And the metering results, it's quite tricky. I'm not really sure what it's actually doing, and you have 3 different options there: prefer overexposure, normal, or prefer underexposure. So I think that it's kind of pushing a little bit like half stop on top. I will test it now, and we will just see what exactly the settings is doing. And I think this is also quite nice for the film cameras, that it's prefer overexposing all the time and you don't need to think about it. And it has a settings for the brightness of the screen, which I also really like. I'm not sure if the automatic brightness works. I tried it, but on the bright sun, I think you need to press exposure meter first, and after that it's adjusting. So I'm not sure if it's a really great function. But overall, that the device it has that functions, it's really great. I really like how it works, how it feels, and I think it's just step up a little bit from like primitive, just stupid screen. So it's quite bright. I can say I prefer this type of screens. Maybe they're not like perfectly readable on the sun, but I think they're doing a really good job there. So it doesn't really mean that it's like perfect, but in the same time it works. It works, I can see it, and I don't really have any problems with seeing the screen. And you can also put it in inverted mode, you can flip it upside down, you can do different stuff. So, and I think the main features, it's just packed. It just works without any problems, and yeah, I think it just works really fine. I will not go in extensive tests of exposure, but I will just compare 2 results. I have white wall, which is quite challenging already, and in the same time I have pictures on the wall, and I will make just metering of the wall with the Zirconic, and I have a side light, and in the same time I will meter with the Leica with my exposure meter, and I will just test what its settings of the under and overexposure do. So the first of all, just let's make metering. So I will meter this wall, and I will start with a normal 1/25 and just meter it and measure and see which results I have. And I will do the same with the KEKS meter and just compare the results with the normal, with the prefer underexposure and prefer overexposure. So my metering is 125 f2.0, and this is more or less precise, and I know it kind of works there. So let's try the same with the KEKS meter. Now it's in its constant mode of metering, and if I press once, it's blinking, so it means it's just locked there. So I make a metering, and my metering is showing 2.2, which is quite precise, and I think it's quite nice result. So if I remeter again, it shows more or less the same 2.2, 2.5, and I don't see any problems there. So now let's change the settings to the underexposed or normal exposure. So I go here in the settings and click down with the metering results, and on the metering results I press enter, just go in the normal exposure mode and go out of the menu and try to meter the wall again. So now it's showing 3.2. So as I said before, it's around half of the stop of overexposure, so it's quite nice. I really like to push the film a little bit, and half of the stop is quite nice, especially for this type of meters. So if I change the distance, I think it will help a little bit more. So with a metering from the wall, it's 2, and if I step down a little bit, I have normal metering 3.2, but at the same time I have reflective meters mode on this iconic. So if I move the dome, I have exposure meter here, so I can do exactly the same and basically test the precision of the tool. So I put both of them on the same distance, and now I have a measurement of 3.2, and here I have a measurement, and let's lock them up. So what I can see at the moment, if I use the same settings for the exposure, so for example, I know that on 1/25 I have 1.7 aperture on my face at the moment. So if I measure it, I have around 1.7, around 2, so I have metering of 2. So if I use the reflective measurement and just use the normal, I have kind of a 2.8 because I have more spread and it's less precise. It's 2.8, 3.4, something like that. And if I use the KEKS meter and do kind of the same feature, I just press the back button and you can see that I have a result more or less the same, around 2.8, 3.2, something like that. So I can say it's close enough in the precision for the film. I cannot say it's perfect, and you need to understand that both of the tools, they have a different angle of measurements. They have a little bit different metering type. So, but in reality, I think it's close enough for any type of application like we use in the film cameras, and it has a tendency to overexpose in the settings, which I really like. I don't really like how the Chinese manufacturers like basically assemble that. It has few flows on the camera body, which I don't really like. So basically, if you can see here, it has kind of a overshoot on top. So it's not perfect fit for the Leica, and at the same time, at least for mine, I think they're more or less the same size. And here I have also lip, which I don't really like, which just stick out of the body of the camera. It was not the same with the previous meter, so I hope I can fix it just with a, grinding a little bit of the cold shoe here. And I hope it will solve half of the problems what I have here with the fit of the device on top of the shell. So yeah, I think that's it for today. It's your decision to buy it or not. I will use it so far because it's relatively cheap, and for the functions what I have here, it's a little bit better than the competitors. But if you're watching this, think twice, and in the same time, experiment. Do not try to cheap out on the good stuff, and you should have kind of your own list of the things which is important for you. And thank you for watching, and see you in the next videos.